Hello YouTube, and this is not a traditional deck tech. What I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to take you into the wonderful world of Dredge in Legacy. Well, some would not say it's a wonderful world, but it's a wonderful world of Dredge. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain two variants that I could run, and then break down a few of the other variations of those variants as much as I can within about 20 minutes, because that's about as much time as I'm going to give this before my head explodes. Number one, your core cards for Dredge. No matter what Dredge deck you build, you're going to have these core cards right here. These are your core cards. You're going to run, for your dredgers, 4 Golgari Grave Trolls, 4 Stinkweed Imps, and at least 3, but I normally run 4 Golgari Thugs. These 12 cards are pretty standard in almost any Dredge deck. And then, of course, recursion creatures, Icarids, whatever, and your Narcomoebas. Gonna run 4 of those, maybe 3 Icarids, depending on the build you run, but I normally try to run 4. Always gonna have 4 Bridge from Belows, always gonna have 4 Cabal Therapies, and, that's basically, this is the standard build. Right here. This is the standard. You're going to run, you should be running 4 of each. Maybe 3 of Icarid, 3 of Golgari Thug, depending on the build you make. First, what we're going to talk about for the build is we're going to talk about LED Dredge. So when you're running Lion's Eye Diamonds. It's more explosive, and it can win on turn 1. If you're running Dread Return, though. I prefer a quad laser package, though. That means quad laser, you're running 4 of everything. It's the most consistent of the LED builds you can run. Your mana base is going to be 4 Cities of Brass, 4 Gemstone Mines for the rainbow colored mana, because we're playing a lot of colors, 4 Cephalid Colosseums for the ability to just dredge 3 times and fill your graveyard up even faster. You normally want to run 4 LEDs. I only have 3, so I decided to put Undiscovered Paradise in there. It's another rainbow land, and I don't have to really deal with losing life like Tainted Citadel, I believe it is, out of Odyssey. I believe it's that one, I might be wrong. Alright, for card drawing, Faithless Looting, 4 of. Flashback with LED makes it a great choice if you have an LED on turn 1 in a City of Brass, because then you can basically just play Faithless Looting twice, or play Breakthrough, and while it's on the stack, crack your LED for 3 red. Hopefully discard at least 1 Dredger. Draw, dredge 4 times for Breakthrough if possible, then flash back the looting, dredge again. Another 1 mana cost card draw, discard outlet. We have our Careful Study. Really, just basically it's a Faithless Looting without the flashback. Works great, turn 1 works good. And then our creature, we have Putrid Imp. This, actually, I remember playing Dredge-based decks back when it was an extended deck and it was called Frigoride. That's when Putrid Imp went from literally, not even 10 cents, if that, to being a very, very hot common. At least in tournaments that I played, because everybody wanted to run it. Everybody, I want to run Dredge, I want to run Dredge. So that's where it became pretty popular. And then, of course, variants are going to be more or less, maybe you want to put another Tireless, maybe you want to put Tireless Tribe or 2 into the deck. Maybe you don't want to run 4 Golgari Thugs, so you're going to put maybe 1, maybe 2 Dark Blasts in there. You know, 1 in the main, 1 in the side. I could see that happening more often. And if you're not going to go with a quad laser build, but you're going to go with a Dread Return build, one of the earliest variations of it and ways to win on turn 1 is Flamekin Zealot. Create a bunch of bridge from below tokens, Dread Return Flamekin Zealot, give them all haste and +1. You buff them, you give them haste, you can swing for lethal on turn 1 in some cases. But I prefer the quad laser. It's more consistent. I don't have to deal with, say, decks that have, say, like, you know, 3 Thugs, 3 Icarids, you know, 3 Careful Studies and 3 Breakthroughs. I just have 4 of everything instead. But you can easily make a quad laser build. And if you want to take LED out of this build right here and make it an unleaded dredge, you could just, you know, I would just replace it with Undiscovered Paradise. And there you go. You save a couple $100 right there. It's not as fast, obviously, but you can still win pretty quick. Then what we're going to do is we're going to discuss Manaless Dredge now. This is a deck that wins with no land. There's no land, there's no artifacts, there's no way to generate mana whatsoever. And the way you do it is you Dread Return, Balstrade Spy, I really have no idea if that's how you pronounce it, but you reanimate Balstrade Spy, target yourself, mill your whole library. All the Narcomoeba triggers go on the stack. They clear the stack, they come into play, you then Dread Return again, Flare the Hatebound, boom, comes into play, deals 4 to your opponent, then you reanimate Golgari Thug, he comes into play as a 30-something creature and kills your opponent. That can happen on turn 2 in Manaless Dredge. To get there, you need to dredge the right cards, but to help you, you get Street Wraith, pay 2 life, cycle a card. You can do this you know, during your opponent's end step before the cleanup phase. Dredge a bunch of cards, or you can play Gitaxian Probe. Pay your 2 life on your turn, see your opponent's hand. Most of the time, when you're going to play Manaless Dredge, looking at your opponent's hand normally really isn't a big thing. It's primarily just the enabler to help you dredge further. But if you see various cards that might disrupt your combo going off, you use Cabal Therapy to take them out. Now, how do we get a bunch of cards in the graveyard? The discard step. Whereas the original Dredge deck had Careful Study, Faithless Looting, Breakthrough, Putrid Imp, we have the discard step for this deck, and Phantasmagorian. Now, here's a 5 and 2 black for casting cost doesn't matter. When Phantasmagorian comes in, that doesn't matter either. What really matters is basically the bottom portion, not the power and toughness. That doesn't matter either. The bottom portion of the text. Discard 3 cards, colon. Colon is activated abilities. You can do this more than once. I mean, if you had 90 cards in your hand and 1 Phantasmagorian in the graveyard, you could discard all 90 cards. You just continually activate the ability by just discarding 3 more cards. And you just keep putting them on the stack. And that's how you do it. If you get this in your opening hand, you draw your card, you discard Phantasmagorian. You then just basically just discard whatever you can to it. In groups of 3, obviously. Now, if you have 2 Phantasmagorians in your hand, you can chain them together. Discard the Phantasmagorian, and then your opponent's turn, oh, I'm going to discard 2 cards and the Phantasmagorian, so you can chain it to get what you want in the graveyard and what you don't want, say a Street Wraith or a Gataxian Probe, you keep those in your hand. So you can abuse it to basically further your own deck. And you also have Chancellor of the Annex. This is also a good reanimation target if you can't find your Spy or your Flare, simply because it's a force spike that flies and is a 5/6 beat stick. This slows your opponent down, and this deck basically doesn't interact with anything. I mean, it really doesn't, unless you play Dread Return or Cabal Therapy. You don't interact. You just activate abilities and, you know, fire off triggers on your upkeep and at your end step, and that's it. That's all you really do. And then, of course, your, you know, Bridge from Below triggers. You animate, you got Dread Return. You just sack 3 creatures, that's it. Now, Bridge from Below is awesome because whenever one of your creatures goes to the yard, non-token mind you, you get a little 2/2 zombie. So basically, using the flashback of sacrificing a creature for Cabal Therapy or 3 creatures for Dread Return, and having maybe 1-2 Bridge from Belows in the graveyard, you can generate a good number of tokens pretty fast. I mean, relatively fast you can generate a good number of tokens. Alright? And then, to further dredge, we have Shambling Shell. Dredge 3, he's a 3/1. I have used his ability, sacrifice, put a, you know, +1/+1 counter on a creature a few times. Not really for the counter, but basically just to create more tokens from Bridge from Below. In terms of using Golgari Grave Troll, or I'm sorry, Golgari Thug to top deck a creature in Manaless Dredge, never really did it. I have used it in my LED variant to get another Narcomoeba trigger, so I could get a couple more tokens or a few more Cabal Therapy hits. I've done it that way, but I've never done it in Manaless Dredge. I've never really seen any need to do it with Manaless Dredge. But Shambling Shell, I could definitely see using his ability in an actual game because I've actually done it. And we have Nether Shadow, 1/1 haste. This card's text was changed, and I'm sure everybody on YouTube that does a Dredge video is saying it, but I'm going to say it again in case you haven't heard it. It doesn't say at the end of your upkeep anymore. It says at the beginning of your upkeep. So you have Nether Shadow triggers, Ichorid triggers, both during the beginning of your upkeep. You choose how they resolve because you're the controller of the triggers. You own the trigger. So you choose, I'm going to have Nether Shadow resolve first. And then I'm going to have Ichorid resolve and remove a Street Wraith from the game. Because it's a black creature, so I'm going to remove him from the game. And that's how you can squeeze a few more creatures into play and generate a few more tokens off of Bridge from Below. That's how you can slowly chip away at people. Now, most of the time when playing my LED variation of Dredge, I would say I basically just generate a crap ton of Ichorids and Narcomoebas and Bridge from Below tokens and win the game. Once in a while, when I'm doing the Flamekin Zealot Dread Return, it's generating a bunch of tokens and then just, you know, reanimating a Flamekin Zealot with, you know, a couple of Narcomoebas and maybe a few Ichorids in play, and then just smashing through my opponent with a lot of, you know, hasty +1/+1 crap. With Manaless Dredge, it's basically the same thing, although there have been games where I've had reanimated 2 Chancellor of the Annexes and I've just like swung for 10 on one turn, my opponent drew, and then just said, okay, I can't deal with it, and that was game. There have been games where I've done the combo of I've reanimated Spy, milled my library, reanimated Flayer, then the Grave Troll, and just 30-something to the dome. And then there have just been those games where a crap ton of zombie tokens were just punching you in the face. Along with, you know, Icarids, Narcomoebas, and Nether Shadows. I've had it where I've if somebody played Surgical Extraction. Yes, it was Surgical Extraction. I'm thinking Extra Pay, but it was Surgical because he paid the 2 life on my Golgari Grave Troll. So I just, you know, okay, did the Spy combo and reanimated Flayer the Hatebound. Okay, comes into play, he dealt 4 damage. Okay, I'm going to reanimate the other one. This guy comes into play, his trigger makes him deal 4 damage, but then he deals 4 more damage. So I've done 4, 8, 12. I'm going to sacrifice him to a Cabal Therapy. Okay, the Undying Mechanic. Boom, he comes into play again. Alright, he now deals 5 damage. That's 17. That guy's trigger fires off again to have him deal another 5 damage. That's 22. Okay, so just because somebody, you know, takes out your Grave Trolls, you can still win with the Spy combo if you have it. That's how you would do it in a roundabout way. This is a very, very broad and very, very vague, you would say, video. If you actually play Legacy and you've played Dredge, you would say, wow, man, you're very vague on it. You know, you're not telling people, you know, if you have Icarids and have attacked and your opponent has blocked them, you know, you have 4 Icarids and they have 4 creatures and all 8 creatures are going to the graveyard. Well, what do you do with Bridge from Below? Well, because you control the trigger on Bridge from Below, you basically stack the trigger so the tokens are generated before the exile from the game effect actually happens. So it's just basically you abuse the stack. That's pretty much all you do. I mean, with Dredge, it's completely broken because this doesn't say put 6 cards in your graveyard. It basically just says, hey, draw 6 cards. This guy says draw 5. This guy says draw 4. This guy over here says, oh, you know, draw 3 cards every turn. As long as I'm in your graveyard, you can bring me back to your hand and Ancestral Recall yourself, you know, for the turn. How many decks basically can do that in Legacy or in Magic the Gathering in general? I remember in Extended, I'd see those old Extended Boros deck wins decks. Okay, they would be packing a minimum 3 copies of Morning Tide in their graveyard for Dredge. Minimum 3. And it's a 2-mana sorcery, remove all cards in all graveyards from the game. Literally, people were just hating out Dredge, and it was still winning. People were claiming, oh, we need to ban, you know, Icarid, or we need to ban, you know, the Dredge mechanic, or we need to ban this, and it was... Eventually, people figured out, okay, if you do this and this, it makes it easier, but it's not a guaranteed win. Dredge was the boogeyman of Extended when it came out, and it's the boogeyman of Legacy, because you can do LED Dredge with Dread Return, and Flamekin Zealot win on turn 1, Quad Laser and build up zombie tokens, and just Icarid beats. Okay? You could do Manaless Dredge, and there's also, you know, 2 other variants of Manaless Dredge that I don't cover because I don't have the cards for those yet. You know, and you can do Flare of the Hatebound kills by reanimating Golgari Grave Trolls. You can beat with, you know, 1/1, what is it, a Shadow? Yeah, 1/1 Shadows, and 1/1 Flying Blue Illusions, and 3/1 Horrors, and 2/2 Zombies. You know, you can reanimate Chancellor of the Annex and just force spike them every time they play something and beat for 5. So there are many choices with Dredge. And for the most part, Dredge is a relatively cheap deck. Manaless is about 150 tops if you go with a really expensive sideboard. I highly recommend Dredge as a deck for anybody serious about playing Legacy.